This is 13 Minutes. I'm Elliot Reeves. My guest today is Edward Hallam. Ed, it's brilliant to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Elliot. It's good to be here. I've been watching a few of them. They're really, really good so far.
Thanks, man. You were saying that you like the 13-minute format.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such like a condensed amount of time, isn't it? So it kind of cuts on all the waffle and it's just sort of straight to the point. So I like it. Yeah, it's good.
Just the facts.
Yeah, that's all people want to know. People want value. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly, man. We'll try and deliver some. So let's start with the easiest question. Who is Ed?
You say it's the easiest question. I've been thinking about this. So yeah, my name's Ed, otherwise known on other socials as Edward Joe. My actual name's Edward Hallam. So there's a few, but basically I'm a videographer, photographer. That's kind of where my background is. And then more so this past year since I went full-time freelance, I would say if I was to like say it in a few words, it's just kind of content creator and then kind of social manager and social strategist. And that sort of last part has come in recently. So yeah, work with brands, influencers. Last year, more specifically, or I would say I'm known for working with influencers more than brands. And yeah, just doing video editing, social. There's kind of a lot. I mean, I'm only 19, so I'm still kind of figuring out what I like for myself. But that's kind of the general gist of it, I suppose. Video online, stuff online.
Yeah, man. It's like, honestly, because obviously we've met and chatted before, like your resume to date, really in the last, I guess, like 12 months has been unbelievable. Maybe tell us a little bit about your personal journey and how you got involved in what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny bringing up, say the last 12 months. It's absolutely like baffling to see kind of like how it all happened. And it came, so sort of brief intro. I'm from a small island called Shetland, which is where I am right now. Currently, my parents' little side room next to the living room is where my office is. And yeah, so I've been here all my life. I'm not originally from here, hence the English accent. I was born in England, but grew up all my life in Shetland. And then started getting into like video at like 15, maybe like 14, 15 years old. And it just sort of grew. Like I'm one of those people that, and you might even know this, like I'm very persistent. Like I'll kind of just always knock on someone's door, like opportunity. So kind of from like the age of 15, I was just doing whatever I could, like different volunteer groups, everything. And sort of cutting a long story short, that sort of brought me to Glasgow. I spent a year in Glasgow working with Gavin Bell, who you've had on before, and kind of a few people know. Like I worked with him on the social side of things whilst studying as well. So I was studying a full-time course whilst working part-time for Gav's agency and doing freelance. And then, yeah, finished that, like graduated from my course last June because I just did it for a year. And then I was like, right, I'm going to do full-time freelance. Mm-hmm. And sort of like to some of the last 12 months, like I said, it's been very like influencer based. So I'm most notable, I would say, for two people specifically. Julius Dean, who's kind of more prominent on Facebook and Instagram, and then Morgs, who's kind of more well-known on YouTube. And kind of Morgs was like my last thing where I was sort of living in-house and doing all the content. So their probably combined following is probably up to close to like 35 million. So it was kind of surreal seeing like the monthly numbers and stuff like that, especially on stuff you've worked on. So yeah, that's like a brief overview of what I've been doing, or kind of like how it started, I suppose.
Yeah. So what's the future looking like?
Well, it's funny. Like I'm pretty sure I read one of the later questions about kind of you've got for the sort of kind of how you're thinking how you're doing basically with coronavirus. Trying to get my words out here. How you're doing with it, and actually, it basically threw a massive like spanner in the works for me. I've not really like I've lost work, but I wouldn't say I'm as bad as some people. So I'm very, very grateful for that. But at the same time, when I left Sheffield, which is where I was living for 4 months, and then I turned 19, and like the goal was this is back in February. So turned 19, I was like, right, I'm gonna go full force, like grow my business, gonna do lots more traveling. It's funny,
Hmm.
like traveling's out the window. Gonna
Yeah.
do lots more traveling. Like I plan to like get a lease on a place this year. Just kind of really wanted to like be an adult and just sort of stop living out of a suitcase all the time, live with my parents, and just sort of go full force with what I do as a job. And yeah, I came home for 9 days because I had two jobs here, two tourist board jobs, and that 9 days has turned into 3 months. So yeah, it's a little bit baffling to see how it all worked out. But my future at the moment is here, doing a lot of remote stuff. But kind of once things calm down, I plan to move back to Glasgow and kind of just start rebuilding, like the rest of the world is rebuilding, really.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the corona situation in Shetland? You had
So
cases and
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. So I think at first, like Shetland people were kind of panicking because I think like, and I suppose even myself, like the number, I think it was like per 100,000 population was quite high of people kind of getting tested and infected and stuff like that. It didn't look great on paper, but to my knowledge, I believe we've only had like 6 or 7 deaths. I could be corrected on that. I think it is about 6 or 7, and the actual infected cases I don't think is far or like even into the hundreds. Again,
hmm
I might get savaged here in the comment, but but generally it's not that bad. And Shetland people are quite smart. It's so wide open. So even from week one when lockdown was enforced, I mean people were still going out more than once a day. It's just people aren't like, especially in an open community like this where there's lots of space, people aren't going to stick to it. But I think everyone has stuck to it pretty well, and a lot of like obviously all businesses closed down. Things like the main supermarket Tesco is fairly well restricted. So
hmm
just as kind of similar to everywhere else, just without the stress in the hospital. Like my parents both work for the NHS, and it's not been like what it would be in London or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. How have you been keeping yourself entertained then?
So the first kind of couple of weeks was like a massive adjustment because it was essentially I had to like admit the fact that I'm here now. And I remember back then I was like, oh, it'll be at least till the end of May. And well, it's gonna be longer than now, but it was like it was like a weird kind of like admittance. And then once I started getting my stuff together, I was like, right, okay, well, I'm gonna have to start doing more editing, start kind of looking more on like the remote stuff, so social management, whatever.
Hmm.
And that's literally what I did. So the first kind of 3 weeks, I'm trying to think how long we've been in lockdown now. Like first 3 weeks was a bit all over the shop, and then I started like laying out a bit more of what I wanted to do and like what I wanted to achieve. And yeah, and actually like the biggest thing, because I know you've talked about it on here before, and the one previous with Mitch, like mental health has been a massive thing. And it's something I've never ever had an issue with really in my life up until this point, and I've only really noticed it now. The up and down is incredible. So I'll wake up in the morning really excited for the day, 7 a.m., might have a run or whatever, all the typical stuff that you see. And then come 12 o'clock, I might just absolutely nosedive and not really want to do much work. So yeah, work wise, it's okay. Just keeping myself busy. Picked up like playing the guitar again and like messing about with other things. But generally, I'm very grateful for my situation compared to some. But yeah, it's kind of made me acknowledge like the mental side of things more than anything else.
Hmm. Hmm. So, how do you think the world is going to start to change as a result of what's happening just now? And how would you like to see things change?
Man, it's like it's one of those weird things. It's such a. I think the outcome of Corona, or like how we're going to come out of this, I said to you before, like a lot of people, because of their political views, will have kind of their views on should we lock down, should we not, and all this sort of stuff. And I would say I'm pretty like impartial on that front. I don't really have massive political views, but having said that, I do think as a world, it'll kind of force us to take things more slowly in the future. And I don't even mean in terms of diseases and viruses. Like I've seen on the news last night that the I think China's like surface level, like the atmosphere, sorry, from like greenhouse gases and stuff has dropped by 24%. And you're
Hmm.
now seeing like in other countries, you're now seeing the Eiffel Tower. You're now like in India, it's a lot less like a lot less smog. So I think in terms of like saving our planet, it's
Hmm.
gonna be like people are kind of shocked. and sort of like shocked into action. So I think that's the good that's going to come out of it, but also just people slowing down. I think like I'm all for the people that are like use your time wisely, but also kind of like use your time wisely during this. I mean, we were joking about it before, like the people that saying like if you're not doing this and this, you lack discipline and stuff. But if you want to have a lazy day, then have a lazy day. Like people need to relax and sort of take that calmly, which I do. So it's kind of like might work for 4 hours and then do nothing for 4 hours. I might work for 8 hours. It chops and changes all the time, and motivation will always come and go. But I think people just generally take life a bit slower and a bit more kind of they'll think a bit more about their future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in terms of in like how you would like to see things change.
I mean, it really just adds on to that. I would like to see people take more of a mental note of things. I know I've had to just because for so long I've kind of brushed under the carpet that I was just like that whole thing of like, oh, you need to keep working, like a whole hustle mentality and that stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just like keep working through it. And actually, when it comes to a point, especially in a creative job, where you're like completely like can't be bothered and what was once a hobby when you're 15 years old you actually don't enjoy anymore, like that kind of breaks your heart a little bit. So hence like me sort of still figuring it out and diversifying it, and sort of coming back to your actual question, I think it'll just be what I'd like to see is people just sort of putting less pressure on themselves to like achieve a certain thing all the time, like not getting so wrapped up. Like it's good to work hard, but it's also good to kind of view things from like a much bigger perspective. And for
Yeah.
me, like mindfulness has helped with that a lot. Like I focus a lot more on my kind of meditation and things, which has been great. Like to have the time to do it, like during all this.
Yeah, that's probably quite a nice segue into the last question that I have is what advice or insights would you give to anyone that was struggling just now?
I mean, it's always such a weird one because you kind of feel like a bit of a hypocrite, but um, just sort of, and it's a massive cliche, but just sort of stopping. And if you're feeling like not great, there's kind of like two, or the thing I've learned recently, when I was like in one of my guided meditations, and it was talking about RAIN, which means recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture.
Mm.
So it sounds all mystical, but it's really not. Like if you have a challenging thought, all that means is just kind of recognizing it, allowing that thought to kind of be there, and sort of riding it through as though you're like riding a rough wave. Investigating if there was like any triggers for it, or if it's just like a natural thing. And then the nurture bit is literally just sort of seeing it through, kind of following on from that allow. So when I read that, I was like, oh man, so I'm having like all these thoughts and not feeling great, but I know it will pass. And it's such a cliche, and it doesn't really help when people are in that moment. But all I can say to you, or kind of what I say to myself, is just like it will pass, and just try and focus on the things you enjoy and do less of the stuff you don't enjoy. That might be hard for some people, but I know just sort of just taking everything way slower can change like so much stuff. And that's kind of been a theme for this whole 30 minutes, is just kind of the slowness of things.
Awesome. You've got some fascinating wisdom for a guy so young, man. It's impressive. It's good stuff. Really good.
Yeah, just go on the internet a lot, read a lot of things.
Nice. Well, Ed, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I look forward to actually catching up in person when this is all over. But look after yourself, stay safe, and yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
You too, man. Thanks so much for having me on, and
That's a
anybody
pleasure.
watching, thank you for watching.
Cheers.